This is a Headgum podcast.
Hello, Halflings. It's me, Jeremy Cobb, but Andrew V calls me Jeremy Not Renner Cobb because they already call their other friend Jer Bear, and the only other Jeremy on their radar was Hawkeye. So, and Andrew V also sent us a super nice message on Patreon. So shout out to them for that. Thank you, Andrew V. And I am joined today by...
Hello, hi. My name is Olivia Kennedy, but you can call me Liv.
Yes.
Hi. Yes.
So
today, Jeremy.
Yeah. Today's episode is a little bit of a serious one, it's actually a very serious one because we are talking about something that is very important and has affected this community more so than anything in a good long time. Yep. If you thought the Hadozi was a big deal, good Lord. We're here talking about the OGL. In this episode, we will be very shortly interviewing Mr. Kyle Brink, who is the D&D, the D&D team's executive producer. That's his official title. We are here. He's here to talk about the OGL. He has said that nothing is off the table in terms of questions. Liv, how you feel about this?
It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be great. I think we should dive straight into it, and because we know the people are waiting for it.
We are here with Kyle Brink, D&D team's executive producer. Kyle, first of all, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here.
Yes. I guess my first question. Yeah. My first question is, in your own words, why are you here?
Because what's happened in our community has affected creators and the community first and hardest. So that's where I needed to go first.
Okay. Well, I guess on the subject of things affecting the community, this entire conversation is obviously in the wake of the OGL controversy. So my first question would be, why is it that management feels the need to change the OGL in the first place, or at least felt the need to change the OGL in the first place?
Yeah, so we still have a lot of real concerns about big media corps moving into the D&D space, new technologies that weren't considered when the OGL was first written, the emergence of some hateful content that's coming around out there. When you have a bigger community, you have a bigger duty. And we're just worried about the impact of some of these things. Mm-hmm. And that was the origin. I will say that I've been at Wizards for a couple of years now, and this was in process when I got here. So these concerns have been a concern at Wizards for a long time. And I was part of the team that picked up the ball and continued forward with it. But those were the motivations behind it is worries about, and when I say big media corps, I don't mean Wizards big. I mean like Meta big. I mean like Disney big. That's the kind of stuff we were actually worried about.
Mm-hmm. So specifically, in what way were you worried about a company like Disney, somehow interfering with D&D?
So under the OGL 108 is written, there's quite a bit of things you could do with the SRD. And just as a for instance, this wasn't a specific concern, but you asked for an example. Mm-hmm. Let's say that you were a large social media company that had built an amazing social media platform, and then you would use those dollars to make a virtual reality metaverse, you might say. Let's say you were some unnamed company that had done all those things, and then you decided to make a D&D virtual reality space where people could come and play D&D in VR. Well, as written, we wouldn't be there at the table to talk with them about what's true to D&D and what's not. And we would be very concerned about where a company like that has not had a great track record, honestly, with how it manages its community and what it allows people to do on its platforms, what they would do with D&D. And so we were looking for ways to be at the table when those conversations take place.
Okay. So even aside from that, though, when it was released, it obviously there were the reach, the potential reach of the OGL stretched far beyond anything like a megacorp like Disney. Can you provide an overview of the decision-making process that went into the original wording that was leaked?
Yeah, so the things that were in 1.1, that was a terrible way to approach the goals we had in mind. Which is why it was such an so it was easy for us to do a U-turn and abandon those right away, because it was one of those things where piece by piece, it seems like you're making a good decision, and then you end up in a terrible place. And we're grateful to all the feedback that was so strong and so clear that allowed us to see for ourselves where we had gotten ourselves to. Because the mission was never about hurting the community, the second the community was hurt, we dropped it like a hot rock because we didn't want, that wasn't our mission. When people ask, why are royalties in there? Well, that's the idea was if you're a giant corporation, that would be a huge deterrent to you. And the thinking was, you can see in the numbers that were in there, that there was supposed to be this area where it didn't matter, where if you were a small creator, it would be fine. Mm-hmm. That's all by the wayside, though. It's very clear that all that stuff in there was a huge problem for creators. So we dropped it and left because that's not what we're there for.
Okay, so you're saying that like over the course of the years that you guys spent developing the document, you lost sight of the overall scope of who it might affect?
I would say it's more that we lost sight. I would say we lost sight of the impact of what the impact could be on the people we weren't concerned about. Our focus was so much on who we were concerned about that we lost sight of who we were not concerned about, who we wanted to thrive, who we wanted to help. And so we accidentally, as collateral damage, really did it a lot. Would have, fortunately, it was never published and never will be published, but that document would clearly have done a lot of harm.
And you didn't have anybody in place to oversee this before it was scheduled to be released?
We had a number of people in the room. My team was and this is my fault, was underrepresented. I was trying to protect the team from distractions like discussing a licensing agreement so we can make the game, so we can make cool supplements and books. And I should have had more of my team in the room, and that's being corrected going forward.
Okay. I guess as a yes or no question, or Liv, did you have something you wanted to jump in with?
I just wanted to, this might be something that we'll get onto later, but there have been rumors going around in the community that a meeting took place between Wizards of the Coast and a number of like large D&D and TTRPG creators, where Wizards of the Coast told them that there would be plans for the new OGL and allowed some of them to do the opt-in for like better deals in terms of the monetization of like their actual play shows or whatever shows they're producing. And it was also confirmed by John Ritter of Kickstarter. Like, can you tell us, did this meeting occur? Who was present and what kind of deals were offered or discussed?
I wasn't present for any meeting like that. I mean, unfortunately, well, for this conversation, I make the game, so there are things that I'm not part of, and so that would have been another set of people at Wizards having those conversations. So I can't speak to firsthand knowledge of this, just to set that table. I was aware that we were speaking to creators because we wanted input. We were doing staged feedback where we'd talk to some of the largest creators first to get their feedback, and then moving forward, and we were going to bring it to the community for their feedback as well, stage-wise, so that by the time we brought it to the community, it would hopefully be in a better state than it was. And some of those conversations, I wasn't in those conversations, but I could see how some of those conversations might have been about what would a better deal look like? But again, I wasn't there, so I can't speak to those specifics. I could certainly see how conversations like that could be seen as a big meeting offering sweetheart deals. But once again, I wasn't present. I do know that we were talking to creators ahead of time, and we were soliciting their input on what a better deal would look like.
Did anybody
go
ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, I was just going to say, did anybody internally, sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Did anybody internally at Wizards then later inform you of who these people were that were being spoken to, and perhaps what the specifics of any of those, because you're aware that they did happen. Yeah. Has anyone since said who they were meeting with and what kinds of terms were discussed?
I know who we were meeting with because we talked about, hey, who should we be reaching out to? Who should we talk to first about this? Who are the people who are having the biggest impact in the space and would therefore have the best perspective on all this? And so, people like Kickstarter and some of the larger creators, yes, I'm aware of, who we talked to first, the priority order in which we were talking to people. Mm-hmm. But I don't know beyond that, like the specifics of the conversations that they had. What would come back to the room that I was in was general like feedback that we were getting on, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. So we would know what to do to fix it. By the time the 1.1 version of the document was made public, we had already abandoned a lot of the things that were problematic because of the feedback we were getting. We just hadn't published that update yet, so nobody could see it. That's partly why 1.2 is so quick to come out after 1.1, because we'd already been heading in that direction based on what we were hearing.
Okay. Well, on the subject, I guess put a pin on the subject of who was spoken to for a second. But you mentioned the quickness, the swiftness of the response. Speaking as somebody who was watching the situation as it unfolded, it actually seemed like there was quite a long delay between the initial leaking and the response of over a week. So my question is, if in fact the OGL 1.2 was already in progress of being developed, why was there such a long delay for any kind of communication from Wizards or D&D?
Yeah, this was a thing that got me personally involved more. I mean, I was part of the group, but this is, as you saw very quickly afterwards, I became very personally involved in the response cycle because it was killing me that it was taking so long. And it was, I described it as a long delay built out of many small good decisions. We were working on this document. We thought, you know what? At this point, people need to see action. They don't need to see words. So let's give them the new version. Okay, well, let's make sure this is the version we were on release. Okay, well, I have one edit to make here. I got one tweak to make here. I got one. And you have enough stakeholders, each wanting to make it a little bit better, that perfect got in the way of good. Perfect got in the way of done. And so that the silence was because we didn't want to just say words at a time when words weren't going to cut it. And the thing to release took too long to perfect that it compounded into the silence. At no time did anyone say, you know what we should do? Let's not say anything for a week and a half. Like, that decision was never made. It's what occurred because of all the small decisions we were making minute by minute, day by day, because we're also watching what people were saying in the community, and we would see a new concern arise. We go, oh, we have to make sure to address that in this too. All right, let's make sure to build that in. And so you just get caught in this infinite loop of iteration, and you can never publish because you're not quite ready yet. You're still not quite ready. You're still not quite ready yet. It's it was a terrible situation to be in.
Okay, I have, I guess, 2 or 3 responses. We'll see if the third one fully materializes. The first response is, did no one at any point during that period, seeing the public outcry that was getting worse and worse, suggest even saying anything? To even saying, hey, we are actively working on this. This was any sort of announcement, essentially.
Yes.
Why did nothing happen? Because it's one thing to be like, oh, we were delaying the big announcement, but it and I guess to fully and elucidate that point, there have been reports from people internally who have from secret sources who apparently are verified employees of Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, who have said that the delay was because that management was essentially waiting to see how much of a financial impact this was actually going to have and whether or not the whole thing was going to blow over.
No, that was not the reason for the delay.
It did definitely seem like that, just because it seemed as though, from a creator perspective and a fan perspective, that nothing actually changed until the decline in D&D Beyond subscriptions. Like, that can't be a coincidence, surely.
Well, it also can, because it takes a long time to actually modify a legal document when you have a lot of stakeholders. You can't turn on a dime. And so it actually couldn't have been turned around in response to the decline in subscriptions, because that would have been too fast. It would have been too short a time period for a corporation our size to pull that off with a legal document with a bunch of stakeholders. And so we were already working on that document before the folks who decided to stop subscribing decided to stop doing that. It's the main reason that we weren't ready. Sorry, I want to get to your Jeremy. I want to get to your first question about did no one say we should say something? Yes, we did. However, in that environment where there was already such a lack of trust and already such concern over our motives, every word we knew would be scrutinized and could be radioactive. And there was honestly a fear of making it worse. Honestly, a fear of saying the wrong thing and throwing gas on the fire. I mean, it was bad. You're kind of, we felt like we were screwed if we spoke and we were screwed if we were silent. And so we figured the best thing we could do is just deliver. Here, give you a thing that was better. And in hindsight, obviously that wasn't the right decision, but that was the mindset at the time, was we needed to simply show you what we meant by giving you something better, rather than try to say, oh, we're working on it, because we felt like in that environment, that was as likely to make it worse as better.
I guess when that response eventually occurred, you're saying that there was a lot of thought and preparation put in that any words that you said could backfire enormously. prior to this conversation, I Googled the phrase. I didn't even type it. I just typed the words onto Google. I typed the words "they won" and then put a space. And the third suggested result, without having pressed enter, was "they won and so did we." In light of the response to that, and I guess my question is, if in fact there was so much work being put into that initial response, how did we end up with what we got? Like, who wrote that and who signed off on that?
I honestly don't know. Everything I signed, by the way, I wrote. So if my name's on it, I typed the words. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't take input while I was typing, but every word, if I put my name on it, I wrote it. And I honestly don't know who contributed to the unsigned statement before I started posting. The thing that I was working on was the deliverable 1.2, the actual thing, and the process for how we were going to move forward from this, and bringing the feedback process and the playtest process to the table to get the community involved as soon as possible. That was what I was working on for all this. The statement that came out on the Friday, I read it around the same time you did.
Okay. So essentially, this was
how
not
did you feel about
communicated.
that?
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Liv. Sorry.
I just wondered, how did you feel when you read that? What did you think of it?
I was not pleased with what we had posted. This is one of the things that inspired me to take a personal to put myself into this by name and take ownership of this, because that was not acceptable to me. That's not us. That's not who we should be. And I felt like this needed to, be less of a committee thing and more of a D&D thing.
Well, there were other, aside from just that specific phrasing, there were other issues that folks had flagged up. The biggest of which is that the leaked version of the OGL that people saw was always intended to be a draft, and that Wizards of the Coast had always intended to ask for community feedback. Can you speak to why, if this was the case, that the leaked OGL included a place to actually sign it, that it included, as I understand it, mention of specific dates as to when things would go into effect, dates that had already passed by the time that around the time that Wizards even responded. And not only that, but why, if this was explicitly a draft, why a simple, like, even if why it could not have been released immediately, a statement immediately saying, this is just a draft. What you are all seeing is not at all representative of what we had planned. We are currently working on it, and maybe set a due date, any sort, because that could have fit under the banner of communication. So just to reiterate, why was the OGL worded the way it was, including having places to sign and specific dates specified? And why then, if that is the case, did Wizards of the Coast say nothing? Because I personally find that very difficult to believe, given the apparent progress that had already been made to the OGL 1.2.
So every document that isn't published is, to some extent, a draft, right? Until it's published, then that's the final version. So when we're making a book, for example, we have draft versions of the books that don't get published because we're making changes, and those are all drafts until they're published. And with a legal document, it looks every bit like the final one, because any version could be the final one, but isn't until it's final and published. 1.1 was never final, was never published. It did contain the things that it would need when it would eventually be published, such as dates, which were changed as we continued to edit the document, and places to sign, because ultimately there would be a need for people to agree to it. And so those things are all present in a final document. They are also present in a draft, because a draft, if approved, if everybody likes it, becomes the final. And so to me, it's maybe, I don't know, it seems a little bit like a weird thing to get hung up on because of how drafts work, but I'm in the book business, so I see drafts all the time. So maybe that's why I see it that way.
And what about the second part of the question? Why there was, in light of the fact that it was apparently a draft, why was there no response?
Well, I think that gets back to the conversation we were just having earlier about what was hanging up our responses. The immediate reaction, the strength of the reaction, caused people to be concerned about anything we said being credible or not, or adding fuel to the fire, or making it worse. And I think that caused some hesitation.
Do you think that the hesitation paid off, given what happened when it was originally released?
In hindsight, I would have much preferred to take a much more active communication stance on that, and to be much more responsive and to get the conversation going much sooner and much more responsively than we were. And yeah, hindsight's 2020. At the time, as it was unfolding, it was a combination of is this as bad as it's going to get? Or is it going to get worse? Will we make it worse if we talk? Will we not? Will we make it better if we talk? It was a tough spot because we care so much about the community and everybody who was being hurt by this. And at the same time, so we were like, how do we make this better? Is it better if we say something? It's better if we don't say something. Let's just deliver it. Let's just give them the new one that doesn't have all these things in it that they're worried about.
So
which, in hindsight is maybe not the right thing.
Would it be fair to say then that at the very least there may have been too many well, I guess the better question is, were there dissenting voices about the OGL 1.1 prior to the leaks, which
Yes.
you indicated that there were. Were those voices from within Wizards of the Coast or without Wizards of the Coast, or both?
Both, for sure, both. And in any large group of people, in order to get something done, you have a vigorous debate. And then at some point you reach a point of commitment as a group. And if, for example, I still disagree at that point, my job is to say, okay, I disagree and I'm committing because we need to move forward. And that doesn't mean I stopped disagreeing, but it does mean that we are going to proceed and I will do the best I can to deliver this thing that we've decided to deliver. And I think the flaw there was that the dissenting voices were not given enough of a microphone, were not given enough of a presence in the room, were not given enough weight to change the decision. But they were certainly present. We certainly heard them. We certainly had a debate going on, both from our internal and our external feedback. And as I said, we were already changing the document when it leaked. So the feedback was moving the ball, it was moving the needle. And then the document became published, or public, I should say. It was never published. Became public while we were still moving it forward based on that input. And that input was very strong from the folks who voiced it. There's people on my team whose opinion I respect very much who were quite against it. And it, moving the opinion of large groups, unfortunately, is not a fast thing. And it took us a while to move it. And in the meantime, it went public.
Does that mean that the dissenting voices were the minority in Wizards at the time? So the majority of everyone was pro?
Well, we didn't.
What was
We didn't poll everybody, of course. So I would say that each person had a different perspective. So there might be people who are mostly focused on protecting our IP. And there might be people who are mostly focused on, hey, I came from the third-party creator community. I'm going to go back to it when my job here is done. I need to make sure that that's still a healthy community. This is bad. You can't do this. And different, so different people come at it from different perspectives. Hey, it's my job. I'm in legal. I'm supposed to give us all the tools we have as an organization to protect us. Okay, so I'm going to give you the strongest language I can. So everybody had their point of view at the table that was legitimate and was coming from a good place. And so your question of was it a minority? I would say it wasn't loud enough in the room. And that's what's changing, is we're giving much more of a voice to the folks on my team, myself included, who are closer to the community and would be able to catch this kind of thing in future and have enough volume to prevent it.
And how are you enacting that? Like, how are you giving them a voice?
Well, it's a couple things. First of all, by moving everything into the Creative Commons, we've just taken this whole discussion off the table. I mean, that's a one-way door. We can't unring that bell. So there's no taking back the SRD and the openness of D&D. It's out there, it's done. So this literal example can never happen again because we can't. We didn't even decide to do it with language. We just did it mechanically. Like, you don't have to take our word for it. That's just how the license works. And so this particular problem literally can't happen again. Now, should we in future be looking at corporate strategies, company strategies that would impact the D&D community? Now, folks like me and and the leaders of my creative team are in the conversation. So,
so you've essentially been given authority to be able to influence these decisions, is what you're saying? You and your team have been given greater authority in order to influence these decisions?
I would say greater respect, because authority for each decision needs to rest with a different person depending on what kind of decision we're making. That being said, being heard and being respected is important. And I will say, to her credit, I know she's gotten a lot of, bad. Cynthia's gotten a lot of, negative opinion about her, but she listens and she does change based on information. And she's one of the most empathetic C-suite people I've ever worked with, by a country mile. So I am confident that when she says she's going to listen, she's going to listen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before I move on to a topic that you actually just started to touch on, I did want to ask, can you give specifics on who was being met with beforehand? Because I'd put a pin in that, jumping back to the pin and pulling it out. Yeah. Can you give specifics on who those meetings were taking, like who those meetings were with, any of them?
I don't have that list in front of me of exactly who we were talking to, but it's the biggest creators out there. I know that was one of the criteria, was like, what's their audience size? We spoke to Paizo, we spoke to Kobold, we spoke to Critical Role. And each conversation was different. It was because each creator is different. Each group's thing that they create is different. And so it's not like everybody got the same conversation, because not everybody was in the same place or had the same questions. There were, but it was like that. It was like, okay, who are the ones that are the top publishers out there who have large audiences that they're serving, because those are the ones who are going to really have the best sense of what's right.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to touch on what you mentioned when you were talking about how you were acknowledging how the Creative Commons now covers all of the SRD 5.1. Here's my question. Is it the intention of Wizards of the Coast to add 1 D&D content to this SRD?
We are. Well, 1 D&D isn't finished right now, so I can't really tell you what all the content is yet, because we haven't finished writing it. But I will say
is
that
the intention to add the content?
Yeah, the intention is that all of the new rules updates that we're doing, including the stuff we're publishing in 2024 that's being called 1 D&D right now, all of that will remain. The SRD will be updated to remain compatible with all of that. Now, exactly how that compatibility is maintained is something that I'm going to leave up to Jeremy Crawford and the rules designers. Maybe it's we put the exact rules language into the SRD. Maybe it's we do some bridging language. Like, for example, the new rules update will refer to species, not race. Well, so the SRD still uses race. So we might put some language in there that says, hey, where you see the word race, use the word species. And that's what I mean by bridging language, just to connect the dots for how stuff works in SRD versus how it'll work in the rules update. But it'll be some combination of those things. The one thing I can guarantee right now is it'll be 100% compatible. Anything you build with the SRD will work with the new rules.
Okay. Are there plans to potentially introduce a new OGL that is specific to 1 D&D?
I don't think so. I don't see the value in it. If Creative Commons is such a great open license. I think if at such time as we decided to put more stuff out into the public space, we'd do it through probably Creative Commons. I think I've no interest in getting into the OGL business. I'd rather be in the D&D business.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's just to be clear, there's no plans for 1 D&D essentially becoming like a closed system where it's like, well, everything that was 5th edition and everything prior is now covered by that. We're cutting that free. Y'all can have it, and we're building our own thing. And this is our new venture. No plans.
No. We don't even think of it as a different edition. We think of it as an evolution of 5th edition. That's why we call it 1 D&D instead of putting a number on it. People like to call it 6th edition. They're going to call it another edition. They might even call it 5.5. I don't know, because it feels a little bit more like what happened as 3 got evolved into 3.5. But really what we're doing is we think 5th edition is great, and we think it could be better. We think it could play faster. It could play easier. It could provide more room for role play. So there's stuff like that we want to do to improve it, but we're not trying to replace it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at the beginning of this, we talked about how the new OGL was designed in order to try and combat like big corporations, big media corporations specifically, or various new technologies. And that this had been planned for a while. Well, obviously, since the new OGL is no longer happening, what plans does Wizards then have to try and address those issues?
we're leaning hard on the community, honestly. We looked at it and said, all right, there's some things that one can do through Creative Commons. Like we can say, hey, you need to pull our attribution, so you can't like put D&D, the name D&D on it or whatever. So there's some small things we can do that might discourage some bad actors. But really, what we're counting on, especially for things like the hateful content stuff that we're worried about, we're counting on the community because, it's been demonstrated time and time again, not least of which just now, that this is a strong and vocal and active community. And so rather than counting on a legal document to give us personally the room to act, we're going to be counting a lot on the strength of the community and supporting the actions of the community to combat things that try to come in and take over the space or try to scam people, through NFTs or whatever. I feel pretty confident that this community is going to catch on to that and make noise. And we would rather be with you making that noise against something bad than trying to put it in a legal document.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I know that there were a number of concerns with the OGL, I think even the OGL 1.2 that had been proposed, that there were provisions in there that talked about potentially I guess shutting down a project if it does not align with Wizards' values. The concern by much of the community, I mean, some of our show members, as many of our fans fit into numerous minority groups. There has been a fear raised that if hypothetically there was turnover at Wizards of the Coast and I say a heavily conservative leadership took over and suddenly say pro LGBTQ plus content is now considered harmful and offensive. Is that is the kind of action that was proposed in the OGL 1.2 still a possibility? Is that still something that Wizards is looking towards, having that sort of authority? And if so, what protections are being put in place to prevent something like that happening?
That's a similar response to what about outside actors and new technologies coming in and making a mess. The community are the ones who tell us when we publish something hateful or racist so that we can take action on it. And we expect that they will tell other people the same thing. And so we're going to count on that community and support that community in helping all content creators to keep the game ever more inclusive, ever more open, ever more welcoming. So we won't be doing it through legal language. We'll be doing it by supporting the voices who are calling out for improved inclusivity and improved openness. We're working on a content policy because people asked, hey, what do you even consider hateful? So we feel like we should publish something that says what we consider hateful and something that is adaptable and something that can grow with time as society wakes up and opens its eyes. And that will only apply to us, of course, because we don't have a legal structure in place to apply to anybody else, but we feel like you should know what our standards are, and we feel like you should be able to participate in helping us improve our standards. So we're working on a content policy to open the doors on that some. But that those two things together are how I'd answer your question. We're counting on the community, and we're going to show you where our head's at on all this.
I think counting on the community is definitely, all well and good. Feedback is great. But is there any kind of intent to, reflect on these things before they are put out to the community so that the community doesn't have to kind of be relied on for this information? Are you going to have maybe like community leaders who can like take a look over things? Like, for example, you had what was the monkey race that was in the
Hadozi,
the Hadozi, yeah, like stuff like that. Is there going to be somebody there who can just like point things out that may get kind of like overlooked, like without it getting to the community point and then everything blows up?
Yeah. So for the things that we publish, we can't really exercise oversight over anybody else. We just got to keep an eye on our house. And so for the things that we publish, we have a thorough inclusion review process right now, where we have external inclusion reviewers, inclusivity reviewers, multiple, 2 or 3 usually, look over every word that we publish, give us a complete report on the things that we need to take action on. We figure out what we're going to take action on. We advise them of the things how we're taking action on their feedback, and then we publish it. And so we do have already, I say already, as of last fall, But going forward, it is an established policy now for everything we publish. And we're also going back, and anything we reprint, we're going through all our old content as we reprint it and putting it through that same rigor. So, when you see the reprint of Curse of Strahd when it comes out, we have some things that we need to do to that to make it better. And we're going to do it based on these outside experts who've advised us on this. So that's our approach internally. And then also in the content policy you see coming forward, we have some ways for the community as well to officially advise us of things. So it's both. We do it before we even publish it, get some experts, and take it very seriously. And I will say, the reports that I've seen, the action plans that I've seen for the things we're publishing are pretty open. I am not seeing much resistance to any of the feedback. The team is happy to have the feedback and excited to be able to do something to make the game better.
Okay, I wanted to jump in then and when did D&D start using cultural consultants for its projects? And then I guess my next question would be, why were they not using it sooner? Because I mean, the indication, even in what you just said, is that they didn't start until at least last fall, or at the very least last year. Whereas other major outlets, including I think some of the ones that you mentioned, have been when the people that D&D was consulting with about the OGL 1.1 have been using and publicly openly recommending the use of cultural consultants and so forth for years. Why the slow movement on that?
Well, we were using them. It just wasn't thorough. It wasn't that every word went past a reviewer. And now the difference is every word goes past a reviewer. And in fact, every word goes past multiple outside reviewers. So there were spot reviews done of things that we thought might be problematic. For example, the Vistani in Curse of Strahd have already been revised heavily once with advice of cultural consultants. So we have used them in the past. What we were not doing is 100% with at least 2 consultants every word we publish. That's the difference, going from some to all.
Like with the Hadozi, for example, there wasn't suspicion based on the past of that particular race that there may be some red flags to pay attention to.
There are a couple of things that went on with that one. So short version is it was not run by a cultural consultant of any kind to catch that, and that the particular there was a particular paragraph in there that really made the connection that to past depictions that we really didn't intend to, that got in there by kind of an outside the normal flow thing. A senior person who was very trusted wrote it, and very few eyes got on it before it got into the final draft. And so it was 2 breakdowns in process. One, we were not reviewing everything, and so nobody had reviewed it, and it even got in there outside the normal process. So we've corrected both of those things. We have much greater rigor on our basic processes, and we've also layered in multiple independent inclusivity reviewers on everything we publish.
It seems to me that we did I say this because we did an episode actually about the previous version of the Hadozi from like 3.5 edition, and even it's funny, my dad knows nothing about D&D, so I described to him the general way that the previous version had existed, and as I kept going, his face went more and more from quizzical to deeply horrified. And I guess in light of that, with how kind of undeniably the previous editions had the Hadozi situated as essentially a parallel or metaphor for like the American slave trade, it just seems like a big oversight to let one person then be responsible for writing a significant portion, because it's not like the backstory was long that was published in the new version, to be responsible for writing a specific a significant portion of the new lore, the new official lore for the race, and not having that checked over.
That's correct. That was a mistake, and it was taken very seriously, and some internal actions were taken as a result. We did take it extremely seriously. The other thing is we have D&D has a long history. It's got a long and deep lore that goes back to some really troubling stuff. And so we're in a place where we want to acknowledge and bring forward some of the cool nostalgia, but also fix the broken stuff, fix the stuff that was wrong about it. And it's in that space, it's very possible for somebody meaning well make what they think is a nostalgic callback that actually dredges up with that hook a whole big wad of terrible stuff that we did not want in there in the first place. So while I can understand how the mistake was made, that does not mean the mistake was forgiven, and does not mean the mistake was not acted on. So yeah, we took it very seriously, and it's not something that can happen again with the current structure.
Well, I guess speaking of Wizards' internal structure, there was, I'm sure you're aware, that the popular TikTok and YouTube creator D&D Shorts published a video very recently claiming to have verified insider communication from employees at Wizards of the Coast. And among the most disturbing leaks were repeated indications that Wizards of the Coast isn't a safe work environment for employees. They specifically named Chris Kao, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, as someone who routinely has quote outbursts and verbally attacks employees. I can actually, I wrote down the quote. It says, Kao verbally attacked many individuals across the company. To my knowledge, almost every person he attacked has now left the company, since it was clear neither the leadership nor HR were going to do anything about it, which also follows on earlier statements and leaks from past years concerning unsafe work environments and lack of diversity, such as Orion Black's statements back in 2020, which Wizards, in fact, publicly apologized for. What are you doing as an executive to ensure that your employees of all different backgrounds have a safe work environment?
So there's a number of things. First of all, just in my personal space, on my own team, the place where I have the most influence, my approach is always to take the phrase that I always give people is, I need good information, not good news. And that's an important thing to state, and it's an important thing to demonstrate. It's important when someone brings me something that's a concern, my first response is thank you. I need that information in order to make things better. Rather than getting defensive, rather than shutting it down, I need the information. Please give me the information. Tell me the things so that I can do things about it. And that approach permeates throughout the team. And so I think certainly now I'm not on the digital team, which is Chris Kao's team, so I can't speak for my actions on my team are not liable to make a huge impact on that team's work environment. It's a big group, and each team sort of has its own local culture. And in my own local culture on the Dungeons and Dragons, core studio team where we make all the books and game and stuff, it's always about being open. I have multiple conversations with the team. I have an open lunch every week that people can just drop in and tell me whatever they want. And the more they see that is actually true, that there are no repercussions from it. I mean, I've only been in this job for a few months, so I have to build a track record. I have to I can't just declare it to be safe. I have to demonstrate it to be safe. And so I'm doing that. And my intent is that over time, people will go, all right, he means what he says. When I raise an issue, he acts on it. He doesn't shut me down. He doesn't retaliate. Great. And that's, I think, the responsibility of every senior leader, especially if we're going to grow as a society, to keep that door open, especially to marginalized folks. And in addition, we have anonymous feedback channels whereby people can raise issues if they don't feel safe doing so. But I take this extremely personally. I have gotten in trouble at other workplaces for maybe going too far as a leader in going after these things. So it's not something that can be trivialized. We cannot do our best work as creators if we don't feel safe, and we cannot do our best work as members of society if we can't address the hard things.
You mentioned that there are separate teams and each team essentially has their own individual culture. That's fair, but is there not an overall system in place to prevent that kind of mistreatment from continuing, or give employees reliable ways to have action taken? Because the indication, at least in the quote, is that whatever systems may be in place simply are not working.
Yeah, there are systems in place for that. Now, I, not having been in the loop on exactly what was raised to whom and how that fed into the process that we have in place for addressing these concerns, I can't speak to exactly how that person's particular concerns were raised and not addressed or addressed. But I can say there is a system in place. There are investigations that are conducted when issues like this, issues of hostile workplace and harassment and those things come up. Those are always confidential by their very nature. And so I am not allowed to know what's going on with that, but I can say the processes exist, and I have been party to some that have reached some pretty significant conclusions and have resulted in real action. So I do know that feedback and the system that handles it does result in real action. I can't speak to what's going on, what the particular person's own experience was, but I can say there is a system, and I have seen it work.
So thinking about the lack of diversity that we mentioned earlier, one of the things that we couldn't wrap our heads around when we were talking about the Hadozi is the fact that there was nobody internally who would have picked up on that kind of thing. Like the very fact that there has to be an external kind of audit kind of says that, you know, maybe there should be some more diversity in the company as it is. Do you think that's something that you can speak on? Like, are there any plans to be more inclusive with your hiring process?
Yeah, we're pretty aggressive actually in pursuing inclusivity in our hiring process, and I'm happy to say that certainly in the last couple of years of hiring, we've made a difference on the D&D team in particular. And part of that, honestly, is that the D&D audience has been growing and becoming more diverse, which is great because, you know, D&D players and creators exist on a spectrum, right? Every player is a creator. We make stuff up at the table. That's the whole point of the game. And then, you know, hey, then maybe I'm a DM and I write a world and I don't want to publish a world. And eventually I'm a big, you know, then I'm Kobold Press, or I'm Critical Role or whatever. So everybody in our community is a creator. And when we hire people onto our team, we hire from that pool of creators. And so as the pool of players becomes more diverse, so too does the pool of creators become more diverse. And that makes it more and more possible for us to hire top quality creators who are also from diverse backgrounds, and have all kinds of things to bring to the table. I think in the case of the Hadozi in particular, again, a big part of it was that our internal process also wasn't followed. So even the people on our team who would have seen it didn't see that text. They didn't get a chance to go, hey, that's a problem, before it was live. And so we had an internal breakdown of our existing process as well as needing to get some outside eyes on
it. In terms of hiring diversity, this actually speaks to one thing that Orion Black said in their statements, which is that they believed that they were essentially a diversity hire, which, look, we're all in favor of diversity, but ultimately I think what makes the difference in a company like this is if you have minority people in positions of power. And while I'm sure that there have been numerous hirings of people from a variety of different minorities, at least in the case of racial minorities, I've met a number of people who, including yourself, who are fairly high up in D&D, and I think every single one of them has been white. And also, I think all of them have been cis men. Not to say that everybody there is a cis man, but it seems to be consistently that we have white cis men still at the top of these groups. Can you identify any specific positions of like significant power? Because you got. I mean, even on the D&D team, you've still got Jeremy Crawford. You still got Mike Merles and so forth. What can you identify any specific positions that have like higher ranking positions that have been filled by people of, say, racially diverse backgrounds?
I think if you look at the credits of our books, you'll see some lead designers there who are not cis men. You will also see a lot of primary authors on sources. These are folks who are coming up through the ranks and proving themselves and earning their respect, not because of who they are, but because of how they are as professionals. Which is the best kind of respect, right? You know, you don't want to be respected because you're the diversity hire. You want to be respected because you're awesome at your job, and that's happening more and more. Look, guys like me, we're leaving the workforce, to be blunt, and we're also not. This is not the face of the hobby anymore. I'm not the majority of this hobby anymore, and so it's important to me that my team of creators look like my players and have the lived experience that my players do. And I think there's been mistakes made in years past where people assumed that D&D players were all, you know, white dudes in a basement, which has been a faulty assumption for a lot of years and gets more and more false every day. And so it's, in my viewpoint, honestly, guys like me can't leave soon enough for this hobby. And we owe you good games. We owe you good products. And so we need to make sure that everybody working on it is real good at it. And that means not just hiring, but also developing, right? When we bring people in who are good, we need to empower them, give them more room to run, give them guidance on what we learned when we were creating stuff so that they can create great stuff too. And then, I always hire people smarter than me so that I can get out of their way. That's my approach. And so as long as we stay on this trajectory, yeah, this is the face of D&D will literally change.
Okay. I see we're running relatively low on time, so I got two big questions that I wanted to get to. The first is that many people suspect that 1D&D is going to be it's going to be, at least with the release of 1D&D, there's going to be a very strong focus on digital platforms like VTTs, that 1D&D could end up being kind of what many suspect 4th edition was originally supposed to be. I'm sure you know, 4th edition was supposed to have a VTT that it came with it. That didn't end up happening, and that caused further difficulties in terms of playing the game. There's strong suspicions, especially with the announcement of the VTT and the clips that were shown, or the images that were shown in the announcement, that 1D&D is going to be like a heavily online game, and that Wizards' focus is shifting more toward primarily producing online content. And that I think the phrase that was used in D&D Shorts' video is that books would then be like collector items or like special things that you could buy, but that were not key to the experience, and that everything else was going to be digital. In terms of physical books, rather, were going to be like collector's items.
So our goal is to give you more ways to play. So it's and not instead. We're going to keep making the game as we do today. And that's also why we love all the work that's being done by all the VTTs out there. We think that's great. It's been essential for people to be able to play that way. And we think that's going to continue to be true. We would also like to offer a cool looking 3D space if people want to play in that too. But it's not ever meant to replace. It's just meant to be additive. Here's another way you could play if you like that. Here's another way you could play if you like that. And I could certainly see if people were trying to make forward-looking discussions, that might say, well, what if everybody started playing that way? Would we ever make books? And then, I could see somebody saying from that, well, maybe then books would become collectibles. That's not the strategy, though. The strategy is to give you all the choice, and then we go where your interests lie. We go where your choices lie. I mean, we're here to make a game for the players. And so what we want to do is put as many things on the table for you as we can and lean into the things that you like best.
Okay. Liv, did you have anything to jump in with before I go to the final question?
No, I think the final question deserves a lot of time. So yeah, let's jump onto that.
Okay. Finally, how does D&D and Wizards of the Coast plan on rebuilding trust with the community?
Through actions. I mean, you behave your way out of a trust problem. You don't talk your way out of it. So, I mean, obviously we'll have conversations like this. This is important, and talking is itself an action. I'm not denying that or setting that aside. And it's the actions that are going to count. What do we do? And that's why we started with the strongest possible action we could, which is, all right, here you go. It's in Creative Commons now. Go to town. No clearer signal we could send about our intentions here. And as more concerns get raised, we take action on them as well. So it is on us now to be responsive and good actors in the space. And that's so some of this, our plans for the future is going to be like, well, we're going to be watching to see what y'all need and acting on that. We want to make a game that you all want to play. And that includes making it a community and an environment where people feel happy playing, where people aren't, concerned about what's going to happen to their favorite creator or their favorite stuff down the road. So, for us, it's all about actions, not words at this point. And we intend to be active.
Okay. Do you have, I guess, if there's a message that you could give to those whose trust was broken? I know that there are many within the community who no longer really feel comfortable playing the game because they feel as though Wizards of the Coast and D&D kind of, or at least the corporate figures in those organizations, kind of showed their hand, and that there's not very much, that the focus is ultimately on profits and not on the people and not on the fans and the creators who have helped boost the game to the heights that it has been. And the heights that it has reached, and make the game so special. Do you have a message to those who feel betrayed, essentially, by what has happened with this whole situation?
Watch what I do, not what I say, and decide for yourself if what we're doing is enough for you to trust us. And either way, play your game with your friends. You don't need to have us at the table if you don't want to. Your game is for you. We'll make stuff for it, and if you want it, we'll be over here making it. You can come get it. But honestly, we should not be messing up your game. You should be playing your game. Honestly, you shouldn't need to trust Wizards of the Coast to play Dungeons and Dragons. I guess is what I'd really say. So we have work to do to build back that trust, but I would hate for a lack of trust in me and our team to get in the way of you having fun with your friends. Because
All right.
Your friends didn't break this. You didn't break this.
Very true.
Yeah.
Well, I guess there you have it. Thank you very much, Kyle, for joining us and for answering these questions. I guess we will see how things go on. We will continue. I can assure you, we will continue to be watching your actions, and I guess we will judge from there. But thank you very much for what you said.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that was our interview with Kyle. And now we're here to chat about what we thought about what went on.
Yeah.
Jeremy, do you want to open on up with what you thought?
Well, I felt like Kyle had we said this just before starting to record this outro. I think it's fair to say Kyle had, for the most part, all the right answers, and I'm doing quotes around right answers. I think that there were a lot of cases where he dodged having to give answers that might have otherwise been uncomfortable. So, such as the questions about Chris KO's behavior, where he's he essentially said, "I'm not on that team." And if you notice, he never mentioned him by name. He only ever said that individual, and so forth, which I think was in reference to the situation with Chris. It seemed as though it was very much like, oh, I'm just over here and all the teams are separate.
Nothing to do with me. And it's like, but if you must know.
Yeah, you must
know.
This dude must have a reputation.
Yeah. So yeah, there was a few instances like that where there was some obfuscation. But yeah, we were told not to hold back, and I don't think we did. I think that we asked every question that we meant to ask. But I don't know. I feel like that we just didn't get straight answers particularly.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit disappointing. But what are you going to do, I guess?
Yeah. And I think we got some straight answers. I mean, there were some things that it's like, oh, okay, this is an unequivocal statement that you're making. There are currently no plans for one D&D to become its own closed system. There are no plans for one D&D to have its own new OGL. Apparently, there are no it's all going into the old one. Okay, there's no plans for basically any of the stuff that people were freaking out about with OGL 1.1 and 1.2. Okay, that's a pretty clear stance that he's taking, that if in fact down the line we see is not true, then we will be able to say, hey, that was a lie.
Yeah, we would like to.
Yeah, there were specifics. As you said, there were some things where it's like, okay, I'm glad that we at least got him to say which at least some of the groups that they spoke to ahead of time.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting actual names, but I'm glad that you pushed on that, because I don't think we would have gotten it otherwise. Yeah, the answers that were given were, they all made sense, but it's hard to believe that they weren't all thoroughly examined beforehand, and like every question that we asked was anticipated, and they had an answer set in place for each of them.
They wouldn't have done this if they didn't have that in place. They absolutely, and actually they had asked for the questions ahead of time, which we did not send them the questions ahead of time. They said that this was specifically so that they could I'm not going to quote them but because I don't have the email in front of me, but I believe they said it was so that they could make sure that they had all of the information, because sometimes people are raising legal issues and so forth, and since he's not part of the legal team, he can't really speak to that. So it that could be the case. If we take them at their word, then sure, that was the reason why they were asking. It could also be because they were trying to be prepared for specific questions and know maybe the tone of the interview so that they could be prepared.
But they didn't even need that, because they definitely discussed everything that we offered to them beforehand.
I'm with you, Liv. I remain unconvinced on a number of topics. Specific, basically everything about the OGL 1.1. I'm like, okay, look, maybe there was in fact some work on a later, I don't know, on later changes. That wasn't, it still to me does not make sense that they could not have publicly said anything. But I don't really know. It felt like, and for full transparency, we only had an hour to speak with him. We had a lot of different topics that we wanted to get to, and so we had to start making decisions about what we were going to push on, what we weren't going to push on, that sort of thing. Like if it was, and that became a thing where it's like, well, he's given an answer. Like I'm not really sure what else to say except I don't believe you.
Yeah, no, it just felt very, I don't know, artificial.
It made the team sound really incompetent. There were a number of instances where his answer was basically like, "Yeah, we just didn't have it together, man." But stated in a very, a much more eloquent way, in a roundabout way.
I agree. No, it just felt, it felt placating in a way.
Which I mean, that was the goal.
Yeah,
it was a damage control interview.
Yeah.
We have not really talked much about our individual responses or our responses to show. There's a good chance that we will be talking more about our responses to show down the line. But I feel comfortable to at least say where I'm coming from. Do you want me to say first, Liv, or do you want to say where you're coming from and what we've talked about as a show? Okay. Essentially, in my opinion, what the OGL that we have and had and continue to have is like such a unique thing for a large corporation to have in place that I was amazed that it even existed. And in my opinion, ultimately we had a great thing. We continue to have a great thing, thankfully, but they were within their rights to change it. Sure, because it's their thing.
Yeah.
But the way in which they were going about changing it, the fact that the leaked document would have given a week for creators to sign and agree to it, the fact that I still don't buy that it was a draft. I still don't. It's just, to me, that's like the fact that they've been working on it for years, and the fact that it was posted or that they had approached people with it indicates to me that if there were changes to be made, they were probably going to be pretty minor.
Yeah.
Because why would they have not gone straight to the community in a case like that? It just doesn't make sense.
No, it really doesn't. Sorry, you carry on.
And as such, I have nothing against the game of D&D. I generally believe, I get the impression at least, that Chris may have been telling the truth, not Chris, that Kyle may have been telling the truth when he was talking about his love for the game and so forth. I obviously can't know for sure, but it seems that he does genuinely love the game of D&D and does overall seem to have positive intentions towards at least the game. But my trust in Wizards of the Coast and D&D as an organization is certainly shaken. And so I'm still playing D&D like in private games. I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I commend anybody who is switching. I personally feel I can say that one thing that is unequivocal, two things is, number one, my trust in the system is broken in their corporation. They have, to me, they have still shown their hand, and now they are trying to fix that. But to me, it's still going to take a lot of effort and work to build back that trust. I'm going to need to see a lot more than even just an interview. If the things he's saying in the interview are carried through and the attitude that he brought forth in the interview is actually followed, then I'm like, great. But that's going to be, that's going to need to be months of activity or years of activity for me to really, that, as you said, it remains to be seen. That is one thing. The other thing is this: it is not healthy for the TTRPG landscape to have one giant game controlling so much of the space. And I mean, just by how big a deal this was and how many creators were affected by this. And it wasn't just, oh, D&D makes up a section of my sales. For a lot of these people, it's like the main thing or the only thing that they do. And even on our show, it's almost the only thing that we play. And so that tells me that it is time to start boosting, taking an even more proactive role in trying to boost other games and other creators in the space. And so my intention is going forward for future actual plays to feature D&D less often. There
are so many TTRPGs to choose from, Jeremy.
Exactly.
So many.
Exactly. And we already have at least one, I think two recordings scheduled that will explicitly help promote other TTRPGs. There are a couple of actual play things that we have already recorded, or at least partially recorded, that use D&D that happened prior to the OGL nonsense. We're gonna keep those, like, if it's already done recording, we're not gonna re-record it, and if it's already partially recorded, we're not gonna force the cast to learn a new system and then re-record the whole adventure. So that stuff will stay with D&D, but there's a good chance that a lot of other games and planned series that we had for this year, as well as more one-shots that we plan, will be focusing on things other than D&D down the line.
Absolutely. I mean, on Dicebreaker, which is the channel I do in my day job, we've discussed like the idea of like maybe we like possibly would to lean more into D&D, just like kind of overall, but then it was always like a resounding no, because like it just goes to show that you can't rely on one system. You really can't. And there are so many out there that, you know, people really need to pay more attention to. But yeah, everything you said, Jeremy, I completely agree with. It's this whole thing has been a bit of fiasco, but at least it was a wake-up call. So
you know,
that's good.
And I will say, we have had talks about the degree to which the show will be focusing on D&D content going forward, even aside from actual play. But in terms of discussion, I feel comfortable to publicly say that I'm in favor of taking less of a focused role. We'll see what ends up happening. This is not me saying this is a decision. This is me letting you know, just as a creator, I guess. I am in favor of not, I mean, we'll probably finish the class deep dive. I'm in favor of that, but we'll see about the rest for me. We have one class left. That's why I'm like, it's just the sorcerer.
Just the one. It's not the sorcerer's fault. But yeah, like I got TTRPGs coming out the wazoo. Like, you know, we can learn other systems. It's great. It'll be fun. It's gonna be a brand new chapter for 3BH, and I'm very excited about it. So
with that, I guess let us know what you think about this. Let us know what your thoughts are out there in our Discord, on Twitter, and Patreon. Let us know, because look, we don't know everything. That's partly why it's taken us so long to respond, because there was a lot of waiting to see. When it first broke, I was like, is it as bad as people are saying? I was waiting to hear from like lawyers and hear more details about it. And you know, as we heard more leaks and lawyers came to weigh in, a lot of times the lawyers didn't even agree with each other, or the lawyers would miss aspects that were specific to D&D, like where they're like, well, you can't copyright rules system. So what was the OGL originally doing? And then people will come in who actually write stuff and are like, well, actually the language used is something you can copyright. And that is very big to the D&D, like the whole idea of the stat block and specifics of how things are written. The style is something you can, and that is a big thing that people had access to, that sort of thing. So yeah, for me, I tend to try and be cautious because I know that jumping in and just guns a-blazing on the wrong side can sometimes do a lot more harm than good.
For sure, yeah. Also worth pointing out that the questions that we asked to Kyle in this interview, a lot of them were prompted by our patrons and our Discord members. So it's worth checking those out because we do go to our community, you know, as a source very often. So yeah, if you're interested in that, just check them out. I'm sure there'll be links around.
Yeah. And in fact, not only that, there were instances where multiple people had asked versions of the same question. So I just sort of collapsed them into one. And in some cases, I would literally put in parentheses, these people specifically had wanted to know about this thing, or this many people upvoted this particular question. And that helped to boost, in some cases, which questions were being asked. We had our own questions as well, obviously, but yeah. With that, is there anything else we need to touch on?
I think we've done all we can, Jeremy.
We should do plugs, shouldn't we?
Plugs? We can plug, yeah.
Yeah. Liv, you got something to plug?
Sure, I'll plug myself. That always sounds so weird. I'm at Does
on
Dark Magic
air, Liv. On air.
It's a treat for me. I'm at Does Dark Magic on Twitter, and I'm Olivia Does Dark Magic on most other things. I'm also on YouTube now. I'm hopefully releasing a new video tonight. We'll see, maybe. So yeah, go ahead and subscribe if you'd like, but also subscribe to 3 Black Halflings on YouTube, and you can also find me on youtube.com/Dicebreaker if you want more TTRPG stuff. That's not just D&D. That's all right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Cobb1. That's Cobb with 2 B's and the number 1. But you can also follow me because I've reached the threshold. I'm going to look up my username on air. I've reached 150 followers. Yeah.
Can I tell you what it is? Because I know what it is.
Please do. Yeah.
It is the Cobbmeister.
Oh, okay. Follow me at the Cobbmeister on Instagram. I'm going to be posting something possibly today as of this recording or just very soon. Thank you, Liv. The Cobbmeister.
Right. I've been looking at it for just like, oh, there he is. Oh,
he did it.
I see you. Yeah, no, I've double checked and it is correct. Yes, the Cobbmeister.
Yes. And even more importantly than following me on the Cobbmeister, there is a new show. It's either coming out this week or next week. I'm doing it with Andrew Coons at The First Watch, friend of the show. He has been on 3 Black Halflings. I know we've done a couple of kickbacks with him that I don't think have been released yet. And I think we also did a Shire Folk Spotlight with him that I think has been released already. Go check out The Quantum Reactor. It is a sci-fi movie review show. We've recorded, I think, 3 episodes so far. We talk about Sunshine, the 2007 movie. We talk about Everything Everywhere All at Once, the movie that came out last year, 2022, masterpiece. We also talk about Moon, which is a 2009 film, a very, very good movie. All 3 of those, I would say each episode gets better as we solidify our style. But yeah, go check it out. Go follow us. You can follow us on Twitter at Q Reactor Show. And I think we will also be posting to YouTube, but I think on YouTube we are also Q Reactor Show. So nice. Go check that out. Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah, go support. Go support. We also have a Discord. I don't know where the link to that's going to be, but stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Yeah, with that, go follow the show on Patreon, specifically 3 Black Halflings now. Patreon.com/TB Halflings if you want to help and get behind the scenes, help support the show, get behind the scenes stuff, get kickbacks like the one that Liv and I just recorded last week, which I thought was a great conversation that we had.
Yeah, we had a fun time. We just had a nice chat and we really enjoyed it. So if you want to be a part of that, you go ahead and take a listen.
Yeah. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at 3, that's the number 3 Black Halflings. And I think that's just about it. We will see you all next time. So long, Shire Folk.
So long, Shire Folk.
That was a Headgum podcast.